What if the problem isn't laziness, but something much darker? The word lazy carries a sting, a weight that pushes down on your chest. It whispers that you're not enough, that you should be doing more, moving faster, grinding harder. But beneath that label, beneath the guilt and the endless self-criticism, lies a truth that millions live with silently. A truth that doesn't look like laziness at all. It looks like survival. She stares at her phone, thumb scrolling without thought. An hour passes, then another. The screen keeps moving, but her life stands still. To an outsider, it looks like wasting time, a failure to focus. Inside, though, her body is screaming for a pause she never gave it. In another home, someone lies on the bed, motionless. Not because they don't care, but because their muscles feel like stone, their chest heavy, their willpower drained to dust. They whisper to themselves, "I just can't do it today." Is this laziness or something much deeper? The truth is both frightening and liberating. What millions call laziness is often burnout, the body and mind's emergency brake. It's not that you don't want to work. It's that you've been running so long, under so much pressure, that the engine inside you has overheated. This is a silent enemy, invisible, misunderstood, dismissed, and yet it is everywhere. In classrooms where students stare blankly at books they used to love. In offices where workers feel their hearts sink every Monday morning. In bedrooms where dreams are postponed, not because they're weak, but because they're empty. Burnout disguises itself as failure. It makes you believe you're the problem, that you lack discipline, that you're simply unmotivated. And society echoes that lie. Work harder, push through, no excuses. But deep inside, your mind and body know the truth. They're not betraying you. They're protecting you. They're forcing you to stop before you break completely. Millions walk this road silently. The young woman in New York who cries before logging on to another Zoom meeting. The father in London who stares at the ceiling, too exhausted to play with his kids. The student in Sydney who can't open their laptop without feeling their chest tighten. Different faces, different stories, but the same quiet battle. Burnout isn't rare. It's a silent epidemic, a hidden thread connecting strangers around the world. And here lies the twist. Burnout is not weakness. It's survival mode. It's the body shutting doors before the whole house catches fire. Laziness says you don't care. Burnout says you cared too much for too long, without rest. Laziness is apathy. Burnout is exhaustion. And the difference between the two is everything. Because when you realize the truth, the shame begins to lift. You stop asking, "Why am I so lazy?" and start asking, "What have I been carrying that drained me so much?" That shift changes everything. Suddenly, you're not the villain in your own story. You're the survivor of a war most people never see. The climax of this truth is painful but freeing. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are tired in a way that only rest, healing, and compassion can cure. Millions are right there with you, fighting the same invisible weight. And the moment we see burnout for what it really is, we stop calling it weakness. We start calling it what it always was, a sign of strength, a signal to reset, a proof that you've given everything you had. The world wants you to keep running, to keep producing. But the silent enemy doesn't ask for more. It asks you to pause, to breathe, to rebuild. And maybe that's the bravest thing you can do. Because the real enemy was never laziness. The real enemy was forgetting to listen to yourself. And that's where this story begins. Society loves a label, and the harshest one of all is lazy. From the time we are children, the word follows us like a shadow. A teacher looks at an unfinished assignment and sighs, "You're just lazy, try harder." A parent sees a messy room and shakes their head. "Stop being lazy, get up and do something." A boss notices your hesitation, your silence at a meeting, and mutters under their breath, "Unmotivated." The label clings, heavy and humiliating, until you begin to wear it like truth. But what if it's a myth? What if lazy is not a real identity, but a misunderstanding? To see it, we need to step back and look at the culture that created the label in the first place. Productivity has become the new religion. We measure our worth in tasks completed, hours logged, and money earned. Rest is not celebrated. It's shamed. The person who takes a break is seen as falling behind. The person who collapses is accused of being weak. And so, when your body begs for pause, society has only one word for you: lazy. This myth has a long history. During the industrial age, workers were told their value was in their output. Schools trained children not to think freely, but to sit still, follow rules, and produce results. In this system, slowing down was never an option. You either kept up or you were left behind. Even today, in a world of smartphones and constant notifications, the pressure has only multiplied. We're told that success belongs to the busiest, the hustlers, the ones who never stop. So when exhaustion takes hold, there's no space for compassion. The judgment is swift. You're not tired. You're lazy. But here's the quiet truth. Most people accused of laziness are not unmotivated. They are depleted. They are burned out by unrealistic expectations, endless comparisons, and the crushing weight of trying to prove their worth. When you scroll on your phone for hours, it's not because you don't care. It's because your brain is desperately seeking an escape from demands it can't keep up with. When you lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, it's not indifference. It's the body's last line of defense against collapse. The turning point comes when we see that laziness is not the enemy. The culture of overwork is. Every judgmental voice, the parent, the teacher, the boss, they are echoing a society that values performance more than people. A child told they're lazy doesn't grow more disciplined. They grow more ashamed. An employee shamed for not trying hard enough doesn't suddenly light up with energy. They sink deeper into fatigue. Shame has never fueled greatness. It only feeds despair. The climax of this truth is striking. Burnout is invisible. It doesn't leave bruises or scars. You can't measure on a scale or see it on an X-ray. And because it's hidden, society confuses it with laziness. It's easier to accuse and understand. Easier to blame than to see what's really happening. But to the person living it, the difference is everything. Laziness says, you don't want to. Burnout says, you wanted to but you couldn't. Listen closely, and you can hear the voices of judgment that haunt millions. Why can't you just be more disciplined? Everyone else is managing. What's wrong with you? Stop making excuses. But those voices are wrong. What looks like a lack of will is often a lack of energy, a lack of recovery, a lack of care from a world that demands too much. And the people who suffer most are not the ones who never tried. They're the ones who gave everything until they had nothing left. Pacing through this story, one truth becomes undeniable. We must unlearn the myth. Laziness is not the default to the human spirit. Humans are wired to strive, to create, to move forward. When that spark goes out, it's not because the flame was never there. It's because the fuel has run dry. And labeling someone lazy only smothers the fire further. This is why the myth of laziness is so dangerous. It turns survivors into sinners, exhausted people into outcasts. It strips away empathy and replaces it with judgment. But once you see past the myth, the picture changes. You begin to realize that what millions are experiencing isn't a lack of motivation. It's a cry for rest, for renewal, for a chance to be human again. And here lies the hope for what comes next. If laziness is just a myth, then what we're really seeing in millions of lives is something far more complex and far more urgent. A silent epidemic that disguises itself as weakness but reveals a deeper truth. Burnout isn't a mood. It's a collapse. It doesn't arrive with a warning label or a clear beginning. It creeps in quietly, disguising itself as tiredness, as distraction, as a bad week. But then one day, you realize it's no longer just about feeling tired. Something inside you has stopped working. Burnout has layers, like a silent illness that eats away at every part of who you are. The first is mental. Your thoughts slow down, like heavy gears grinding against each other. Simple tasks feel impossible. Opening an email feels like lifting a mountain. Decisions that once came easily now paralyze you. A doctor might ask, "Are you stressed?" And you might nod, but it's more than stress. It's as if your mind has been drained of light. You forget words mid-sentence, lose focus mid-conversation, and feel like a stranger in your own head. Then comes the emotional layer. You stop caring about the things you used to love. Passion, joy, motivation, they all fade into gray. Friends call, but you don't answer. Not because you don't want to, but because the thought of pretending to be okay feels unbearable. You're fine, the doctor says, scanning for physical signs. But you know you're not fine. You're numb. You're disappearing. That emptiness weighs heavier than sadness, because at least sadness means you still feel. Burnout leaves you hollow. The third layer is physical. Your body begins to mirror the collapse of your mind. Headaches, muscle pain, constant fatigue. Your chest tightens, your stomach twists, your heart races for no reason. Sleep doesn't restore you. Food doesn't fuel you. Some mornings, standing up feels like climbing Everest. And yet when you seek help, professionals may brush it off. You just need to rest more. You're being lazy, unmotivated. But laziness doesn't cause your body to shut down. Burnout does. The turning point comes when exhaustion becomes dysfunction. It's no longer about being tired after work or craving a weekend off. It's missing deadlines because your brain simply can't hold focus. It's forgetting appointments, neglecting responsibilities, pulling away from people who care. This isn't weakness. It's a survival response. Your body forcing you to stop before you break completely. Burnout isn't a failure of willpower. It's your system hitting the brakes when you've ignored every earlier warning sign. The climax is devastating. The body begins shutting down, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Burnout is a last resort defense mechanism. When the demands on your mind and body exceed your capacity for too long, your system collapses to protect you. It's like an engine overheating. If it doesn't shut off, it will destroy itself. That's why so many people describe burnout not as tiredness, but as hitting a wall. No matter how much you push, you simply can't move forward. What makes this even more painful is how often it is misdiagnosed. Doctors call it stress. Bosses call it laziness. Families call it weakness. But to the millions who live it, the truth is unmistakable. This isn't about not trying. It's about being unable to try anymore. One woman described it perfectly. It wasn't that I didn't want to get out of bed. It was that I couldn't. My body had decided for me. The pacing of burnout is slow, heavy, relentless. And so must the way we talk about it be. This is not a motivational speech or a passing phase. It's a collapse of mind, heart, and body. And the world has been too quick to confuse collapse with laziness. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Burnout isn't the end of your story. It's a signal. It's your body screaming that something has to change. And if we mistake it for laziness, we risk ignoring the one thing that could save us. The story deepens from here. If burnout is collapse, what happens next? Do we stay broken, or do we find a way to rise again? Every burnout has a moment where the world goes silent, a point where the body and mind can no longer pretend. It doesn't arrive politely with a warning. It crashes into your life, loud and undeniable. For some, it happens at work. One moment typing, the next staring blankly at a glowing screen, unable to remember why you're there. For others, it's behind the wheel of a car, hands gripping the steering wheel while tears fall uncontrollably. Or maybe it's fainting in a crowded office, the fluorescent lights spinning as everything inside finally shuts down. One woman described her breaking point in a whisper. I was writing an email, and suddenly I couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but they wouldn't type. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I thought I was dying. It wasn't death. It was burnout taking the wheel. And for millions, the moment looks different, but the silence it brings feels the same. Friends and colleagues often notice something is wrong, but they rarely understand. They see the trembling hands, the pale face, the sudden tears. They ask, "Are you okay? Do you need a break?" But the truth is harder to explain. You're not just tired. You're not just stressed. Something inside has fractured. The pressure you carried for weeks, months, maybe even years, has finally broken through. And now you're standing in the wreckage of your own limits. I can't keep going like this, he mutters, slumped in his car seat, fists pressed against his forehead. It's not a dramatic confession for others to hear. It's a desperate truth spoken into the air, because saying it out loud makes it real. That moment, the breaking point, is when denial ends. You're no longer convincing yourself that it's just a rough patch. The collapse makes it clear this isn't laziness. This is survival mode screaming at you to stop. The turning point is painful but necessary. Collapse forces recognition. It drags you out of the illusion that you can keep pushing, that one more coffee or one more late night will fix things. In the breaking point, you realize your body has limits, and ignoring them doesn't make you stronger. It makes you break faster. For many, this moment is terrifying. The body betrays them in public places, shaking hands during a presentation, bursting into tears in a grocery store, fainting during a shift. These crashes don't just bruise pride, they scar the soul. The climax is raw and unforgettable, the crash scene where nothing works anymore. A young man collapses onto his bed after a long day, whispering, "I'm done. I have nothing left." A woman hides in a restroom stall at work, tears streaming down her face, repeating, "I can't do this. I can't do this." These are not stories of weakness. They're the most human confessions of all, the acknowledgement that something is broken beyond willpower. Pacing in this chapter mirrors the crisis itself. It starts slow with quiet hints, then accelerates into urgency until the crash happens all at once. That's how burnout feels. Sudden, even if it's been building for months. The drama of these moments makes them unforgettable. Viewers feel the weight because they've seen themselves in the fainting, the crying, the breaking mid-task, and then the silence after, the chilling moment where you ask, "What now?" The world keeps moving, emails keep coming, people keep calling, but inside, everything has stopped. That silence is the proof. Burnout isn't laziness. It's the body's alarm bell. And once it rings, nothing will ever be the same again. The story doesn't end here. Breaking is not the final chapter. It's a revelation. Because from this silence comes the first real chance to heal. But before healing begins, the collapse must be faced for what it is. A survival cry that cannot be ignored. What the strongest thing you could do is stop. We live in a culture that worships motion, the grind, the hustle, the endless push forward. But what if real strength isn't in how hard you push, but in knowing when to pause? For millions fighting silent battles of exhaustion, the truth is almost impossible to accept. Sometimes the bravest act is putting everything down and choosing rest. Think about the greatest achievers we admire. Elite athletes who train their bodies to the edge also carve out sacred time for recovery. A marathon runner doesn't call it laziness when they take a rest day. They call it training. A musician doesn't shame themselves for silence between notes. They know that the pause makes the music whole. The same is true in life. Yet when it comes to our own exhaustion, society has trained us to feel guilty for stopping. "I feel lazy when I rest," she admitted to her therapist. The therapist leaned forward, voice steady and calm. "Rest isn't laziness. It's repair." That single sentence reframes everything. Rest is not a betrayal of productivity. It's the foundation of it. Without it, the body breaks, the mind falters, the spirit collapses. With it, energy returns, clarity sharpens, and life begins again. The turning point arrives when guilt shifts into compassion. Imagine carrying a heavy weight for hours, your arms shaking, your body aching. Would you call yourself weak for setting it down? Or would you recognize that strength lies in listening to your limits? Burnout is the body screaming for mercy, and rest is how you answer. That moment of pause is not an admission of defeat. It's a choice that keeps you alive long enough to keep fighting. There's a strange relief in this realization. The relief of no longer needing to prove yourself in every second. The relief of knowing that your worth isn't measured by constant productivity. The relief of recognizing that even the strongest hearts beat in rhythms, not in constant motion. Like the inhale and exhale of breath, you are designed for balance. And then comes the climax. The realization that stopping isn't surrender. It is survival. A young man, once ashamed of lying in bed for an entire day, later discovered that those pauses were the only thing keeping him from collapsing entirely. A woman, once scolded by her boss for taking a day off, later realized that days saved her from a complete breakdown. These aren't stories of weakness. They are stories of endurance. Rest was the strength that carried them through. Mentors and resilient figures throughout history knew this truth. Leaders retreated into solitude before returning with clarity. Artists withdrew before creating their masterpieces. Warriors rested before their greatest battles. The silence, the pause, the stillness, these were not moments wasted. They were the hidden engine of everything that came after. The pacing of this chapter slows, intentionally, like a calm breath after a storm. The words reassure instead of demand. The tone invites instead of accuses. Because here, the audience must feel not only permission to rest, but encouragement. They must feel hope. So let me ask you again, what if the strongest thing you could do is stop? What if, in the very act of resting, you're building the foundation for everything still ahead? Rest doesn't make you less. It makes you ready. And sometimes that pause is the exact reason you'll have the strength to rise again tomorrow. Burnout doesn't end overnight, but it does end. For anyone caught in the fog of exhaustion, that truth can feel impossible to believe. When your body is heavy, your mind cloudy, and your spirit tired, the idea of recovery seems like a fantasy. But healing doesn't arrive in one grand leap. It comes quietly, slowly, in steps so small they almost feel invisible. Recovery begins with micro steps. Not giant resolutions, not overnight reinventions, but small, steady rituals. A 5-minute walk, a single glass of water, 2 minutes of breathing in stillness, a journal entry written at midnight, a short pause before answering an email, the courage to turn off the phone. These acts feel small, but they are not trivial. They are survival in motion. I thought I needed to rebuild everything in a single day, one survivor admitted. But one step at a time saved me. Her words carry a lesson. Recovery is not about speed. It's about direction. Burnout convinces you that nothing will ever change. That's the lie it whispers in your ear. This is forever. But the turning point comes when you notice even the tiniest flicker of progress. When sleep feels a little deeper. When laughter sneaks back into a conversation. When the weight in your chest lightens, if only for a moment. Those glimpses matter. They are proof that the body and mind can repair if you give them the chance. The path to recovery is not linear. Some days feel like victory. Others feel like collapse all over again. That's normal. Healing is not a straight road, but a winding one. Supportive figures, a friend who listens without judgment, a mentor who reminds you of your strength, a community that offers compassion. Help keep you moving forward when you can't see the way yourself. The survivor's voice echoes again. I used to think resting was falling behind. Now I know it was the only way to move forward. Every act of care, sleeping early, eating mindfully, choosing quiet, is a stitch repairing what burnout tore apart. Slowly, the fabric of resilience strengthens. You begin to notice yourself again, the real you, not the exhausted shell burnout left behind. And then comes the emotional rise. Recovery doesn't just mean surviving. It means reclaiming joy. The moment when music feels alive again, when nature looks vivid again, when your heart beats with gratitude instead of dread. That's the climax of this journey. The realization that recovery isn't just possible, it's already happening one step at a time. The pacing is slow and gentle because recovery itself is slow. There's no rush here, no demand to sprint, only an invitation. Breathe, pause, trust that healing is real. Burnout doesn't end overnight, but it does end. And every small act of care you choose today is proof that you are walking the path back to yourself. Burnout steals meaning. Recovery gives it back. In the darkest days, life feels stripped of direction. The routines that once carried you now weigh you down, and the goals you once fought for lose their shine. Burnout whispers that you failed, that you're too weak, that you'll never catch up. But when the fog begins to lift, something unexpected happens. Purpose, real, unshakable purpose, begins to emerge. For months, she sat in silence, convinced she was broken. Work had drained her, ambition had crushed her, and the guilt of not doing enough gnawed at every corner of her mind. One day, she said quietly, "I thought I was broken, but I was rebuilding." That was the turning point. What she thought was the end was actually the beginning of a different life. The shift is subtle at first. What once felt like guilt slowly transforms into clarity. The endless pressure to be productive gives way to deeper questions. What actually matters? What kind of life do I want to live? Burnout forces you to stop, and in that stillness, meaning has room to grow. Many who walked through this fire share a similar arc. A teacher who collapsed under the weight of impossible expectations later found joy in writing children's books. A corporate worker who lost herself to endless deadlines began leading wellness retreats. A young man who thought his worth was tied to success discovered that presence with family was his truest achievement. These transformations are not accidents. They are the aftermath of collapse, where life is rebuilt with intention. The guilt of burnout is heavy. Guilt for resting, guilt for slowing down, guilt for not being who you once were. But that guilt, when faced with compassion, becomes fuel. It's a fire that melts away illusions of perfection and reveals something stronger, a life with purpose. The survivor's voice returns, stronger this time. I thought burnout ruined me, but it stripped away everything false. What's left is real. The energy rises here because this is no longer a story of survival. It's a story of thriving. The breaking point wasn't failure. It was a doorway to meaning. And this is where burnout becomes more than pain. It becomes a teacher. A relentless, uninvited teacher. Yes, but one that leaves behind the greatest lesson. Purpose is not found in constant doing. It is found in living fully, deeply, intentionally. Burnout is not the end of a story. It is the chapter that forces a rewrite. And for many, that rewrite is where life finally begins to make sense. The future doesn't demand endless work. It demands balance. For too long, we've been told that success belongs only to those who never stop moving, who never slow down, who never sleep. But the truth is, those who last, those who rise again and again, are the ones who learn the rhythm of life, when to push forward and when to pause. There's a hidden power in the pause, in silence, in moments where you step back, not because you're weak, but because you're preparing to return stronger. Rest is not the enemy of ambition. It's the foundation of it. Think about it. The greatest leaders, the most resilient survivors, the ones who stood tall after breaking, they all had one thing in common. They knew that restoration wasn't wasted time. It was strategy. It was strength disguised as stillness. And maybe this is the moment for you to stop punishing yourself for not moving fast enough, for not always being on, for feeling tired in a world that tells you fatigue is failure. Maybe this is a time to look at your own life and say, my rest gave me strength to rise again. Because the real power isn't in running until you collapse. It's in choosing when to rise and when to breathe. It's in knowing that your value doesn't vanish when you rest. It's in trusting that every pause is part of the comeback. So let this be a reminder. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are human. And humans need rhythm, work and rest, rising and pausing, breaking and rebuilding. That's how we grow. That's how we last. The strength of your future doesn't depend on endless grind. It depends on balance. And balance begins the moment you give yourself permission to rest. Now the question is, when was your breaking point? When did you learn that rest could save you? Share your story in the comments below, because your survival, your recovery, your rise might just inspire someone who is still in the silence of their burnout, waiting for hope.